Hey guys, I'm Danny.
And I'm EJ, and this is the Your Living Proof podcast,
where we talk about addiction and how it affects the family, from the brutal to the beautiful and everything in between.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Your Living Proof podcast. We're so excited to be here. We have the most exciting topic.
Yeah, I don't know if it's exciting.
It's so exciting.
It's exciting if you're a weirdo like us.
Yeah. Okay, before we get started, though, it's freezing cold. Right now we're recording, and where we live has been single digits for a couple of days, at least for the mornings and the nights.
It's painful.
It is painful.
I describe it as like even penguins start to question their life decisions at this point, like when they're exposed to these temperatures. So imagine us, just these people that are just like, oh, it's just my life now. I just live where I can't go outside because the air actually hurts my face and my feelings.
Well, anywhere that there's ideal temperature year-round has its own challenges because you're...
Bugs? People?
No, you're an anthill of people. Like,
yeah.
Expensive living, everything's crazy.
It's true.
This is different topic for a different day. We're here to talk about addiction. How exciting.
Yes. Hey, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We've had a lot of new listeners and lots of feedback, and we're just so grateful that you're here. Our podcast is for anyone who loves an addict. And that is 1 out of 3 families these days. So you're in good company.
No, I'm glad you did that because the show is growing. We've covered a lot of important topics, and if you are finding this now for the first time, you can scroll through and find some important topics. You'll see that there's a lot of things that are repeated because there's basic principles to step forward. But why we did this is because the world has neglected the number one resource at helping those people get stuck in these addictions. Mm-hmm. If you're new to this also, it's kind of coming to the realization of this hard fact that they can't knock it off. It's really hard for people. It's like as soon as they've kind of overcome that hurdle of looking at this person they love, wondering when they're going to take the wheel of their life again and waiting for that day that's never going to come, then they kind of get to work. But what's hard is there's so many resources and programs and facilities out there for those stuck in addiction. There's resources that help them get this necessary help, like insurance is paying out better than ever before. But families have been neglected.
Yeah, and there's even so many amazing resources for people in recovery, right? Like
Correct.
It's such a great cause that people want to champion once somebody's in recovery. But when you're in the dark space that you're in right now, where you're in the wilderness, so to speak, and you are like, I don't know how this story's going to end. I have no idea how we could ever get through this. We are your resource. We're happy to be here.
Every amazing person like you listening in that loves someone in addiction is always wondering the same things. Like, what can I do? Like, what should I do? What shouldn't I do? And it's really confusing because all your efforts so far have produced exactly opposite of what you'd hoped. Mm-hmm. So let's do this. Let's learn a very, very important thing today. The topic for today is if you love. So we're going to give you the 5 number 1 tips, but the topic is if you love someone with a porn or a sex addiction.
5 tips if you love a porn or a sex addict.
And this could be like 5 episodes, but we're going to just hone in on like 5 very critical things. And there's a few layers to each one of those.
Yep.
And hopefully it helps you just kind of make a little bit more sense of this terrible situation, have a little traction and a little ability of how to move forward.
Yep. You will.
First of all, the topic itself, I got excited because I'm like, I get to sit in a podcast booth with my wife and talk about sex, but it's not that way.
No, it's totally not.
Not
Sorry.
Nothing really exciting about it. This is, in my line of work, I have the opportunity to hear from dozens, if not hundreds of people, even in a given week, as they fill out forms, they reach out, send messages, we get on calls or in groups, whatever it may be, who are sharing stories about their addicted loved one. And this has now become, I don't know if it's in the last couple of years, last couple of months, but this has become the number 1 story.
I would say it's been over the past couple of years. It's become the most.
Yeah, it's these sex addictions. Now, let me get my biggest pet peeve off the table right now. Almost always in these conversations, I hear the word just and then porn. Yes, it's gotten bad. Yes, it's out of control, but they're just looking at porn. They're not doing drugs and alcohol, which, by the way, most of the time is a lie. Most of the time. I'm not saying every single time. Most of the time there are cross addictions, and if there isn't yet, there will soon be. Sorry. Buzzkill. But it's these discussions where people are like, it's just porn. That right there needs to change immediately. The word just has to be removed because that's one of the biggest problems we're facing. It is, without a doubt, the deadliest drug on the planet that is affecting more people than anything else.
Yeah.
Now someone's like, no, that's not right.
And then affecting all of society.
Destroying families, relationships with spouses, children, parents.
Yeah.
People might immediately jump in and say, no, fentanyl is the most deadly. Well, of course, like in a lethal form physically.
Sure.
But what's destroying more lives slowly or quickly, nowadays it's ramping up it's happening quick, is porn.
Yeah, and I would say spiritual death is a real thing too.
Oh, that's a guaranteed in this. So porn is sex addiction. Most people can't even say it for what it is.
Sure.
A pornography addiction is a sex addiction. So let's get into it because I really want. There is not a lot out there. There's not a lot out there to help people. If it's your spouse or if it's a child of yours, whatever the relationship is, there's not a lot out there that's giving you tactical, transformative ways to move forward. So first of all, you're not alone. And I know that's not a big aha thing.
Yeah. But it's so important because it's the most isolating addiction there is. And everybody that's in it, everybody that loves someone is attached to someone, like if it's their spouse, they do feel alone.
Any addiction not only isolates a person where it detaches them from everything that, helps them in life, but it does it to the person closest to them and the family members around them. But nothing compares to that of this. Thankfully, we have improved so much that people can go to church on Sunday and stand up at a pulpit and they can talk about a loved one or themselves who struggled with a drug or alcohol addiction. But why is it, other than the obvious, because the subject matter is so taboo, and why is it that it's almost impossible to get up there and be like, yes, so-and-so had a sex addiction? Why is that? I mean, I'm just even thinking.
Well, hopefully you don't tell on someone else from the pulpit, but.
Someone told me recently that like it sounds inappropriate to say in that setting. And this is just one example, right? It can be conversations in your home or with your girlfriends out on a walk or something.
Sure.
Where it's like we've come to accept things and be like, oh my gosh, alcohol, like it's a common thing that we can loosely say, freely say, but when it comes to these, that's what's so hard.
Well, there's nothing that has more shame attached to it. Truly. I think there's way more shame attached to having a sex addiction or a porn addiction than a cocaine or heroin or meth addiction, to be honest. You could be shooting up and it would be easier for people to say that and like palate that information than knowing what a sex addiction might entail. Does that make sense?
Oh, well, let's say you're out to lunch with your group of girlfriends and your husband is an alcoholic, raging alcoholic. You'll talk about it much sooner than you'll sit there with that group of girls and be like, my husband has a sex addiction.
Yeah, no, and that's what I really wanted to point out is where the point number one is you are not alone, because the fact is that I don't personally know any women that feel very comfortable or comfortable at all, even with their very best friend or their mother knowing that their spouse has a porn or a sex addiction.
No, and so why is this important? And I hope I shared this clearly before. I'm giving you just a perspective of me, just one person who hears hundreds of these stories, and people give it to me raw, which is great. They're not
missing words.
This is the number one. This is the number one. I know it doesn't actually help when you understand that this is a true epidemic. I know it doesn't help your situation, but stop allowing it to feel so isolating, so personal, like such a failure on your part for any way, shape, or form. We're going to get more into that.
Yeah.
But when I say this is common, I've had experiences working with enough young people, whether it be in my line of work or volunteer callings in my church or just out speaking with young adults and different opportunities I get to do. It is the majority who, to some degree, whether you have an addiction, a full-blown dependency on these things, where you've lost your agency, or serious challenge with pornography, it is the majority. We don't know. We don't have the statistics. It's really hard, right? You can't test for it. It's an honor system, which no one's going to be honest about. But it's the majority. It's more than half the people that you know and associate with and you see walking around.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is that it is the one addiction too, where I feel like the person who's actually addicted, they carry the same amount of shame as the person who loves them.
Amen. We're getting into that a little bit later too.
That's why you feel alone. Just so we're clear. It's because you're carrying that just as much. And that in and of itself is isolating because you can't talk about that or even articulate it with your closest friends.
Okay, so let's wrap
So
up
that's number one.
I want to make sure you do not feel uniquely tortured, uniquely disappointing in any way, because this is so serious. This is running rampant, and we've got to change it. We've got to start allowing ourselves to talk, and most importantly, reach out and ask for help. So number two, the unique challenges this addiction specifically presents. Can I go off on a couple?
Please.
Okay, number one, first and foremost, if you have a person that's addicted to sex or porn, and also in conjunction with this is abusing alcohol or, say, prescription medication, that is actually a much better situation than not having a cross addiction. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you why. Because most insurance companies now recognize SUD, substance use disorder, as a brain disease. Therefore, insurance is now paying better for care than it ever has in our lifetime. Yeah. For those who are dependent on a substance. It does not, however, recognize sex or porn addiction as a brain disease yet. It will only be a matter of time before they're going to have to. So to get help, utilizing insurance to help pay for your loved one to get the critical care they need, because there are some big expenses, that's one of the uniquely difficult things about this addiction. If there is no cross addiction, then it leaves you having to pay cash out of pocket, and the number of facilities available are very few. I could go off on it for an hour as to why, but there once was more availability, but because of the stigma around it, because of the fact that it was cash only, a lot of those resources went away. So you're limited to resources as far as structured programs where they're, with full accountability. Insurance is no longer paying for it. Those are some of the, right off the bat, some of the unique challenges you have. Also, we talked a little bit about this before, and when you're not alone, it's the stigma around it.
Yeah.
Your inability to even go to your mother or to your very best friend and talk about it because of the shame that it carries on you.
Yeah. And your family.
The subject matter is taboo. That's where Satan got so creative. He took the most beautiful, sacred, precious connection that we have. I mean, for me, it's my love language is touch, and it's everything. That relationship that I have with her. And he took something so special and actually turned it to where it's like,
oh, he weaponized it. He absolutely weaponized it.
That we can't even talk about it. We can't even go to people to ask for help. So, stating the obvious, your loved one stuck in here, they're not going to go talk to anybody about it. Our last episode is the first stop shouldn't be the bishop or your priest.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It holds true with this more than anything, but that's what everybody does.
Yes.
It's like, go talk to the bishop because your secret's safe with him. poor guy sitting here having all these people come at him with porn and sex addictions, doing the best he can.
Well, and to that point, like if you're like, okay, this is a big problem. We have I need help, and you go try to find a facility and you call these facilities and you're like, so my husband has a porn addiction. They're like, okay, is he also addicted to cocaine? And they're like, no, he's not. They're like, okay, well, they can go to some support groups then. Just we recommend some support groups for them then.
Yep.
Which
They can help. And we're going to get into that about what they need to do. That'll be the last point. Like, what do they need to do to recover from this? Okay. But the other unique challenge is most people wait. And for most of you listening, this will be the case. Most people wait, right? Like they know it's a porn addiction. The most common story I hear is now it's developed into other addictions. They're an alcoholic. They're abusing prescription medication. They have erectile dysfunction because they're 23 years old and they've been doing this for so long. And people are like, yeah, it started when they were 12 or they were 13. Most of it started when, as a civilization, we were so naive. I don't want to use a different word because it's a bad word, but we just let kids have these phones that tapped into everything, and that's when most of them got hooked.
sure.
But the unique challenge is most people don't do anything drastic enough to produce a better outcome until it gets worse.
Right, until they're like facing some legal charges or someone loses their job because they got arrested for this, or something happened that was like it's undeniable now. Like we are being forced to do something.
So insurance is a big deal. Limited resources as far as structured behavioral health programs is a big deal. The stigma is one of the biggest, and that most people just sit there and wait. Temporary solutions become the most permanent thing, and they wait until things get really bad. Yeah, until they get charged. Like a charge comes, like the police get involved, which happens a lot these days.
Yep.
Or something horrific happens, right? That's some of the challenges that are present, because we're unable to even speak it. Means we're unable to ask for help. Meanwhile, this sick person's just sitting here trying to white knuckle this and overcome it on their own. And that's not going to happen. But even those people close to it are unable to reach out.
Well, and I'm just going to say one more thing, and it's like, how do you, like, it's the challenge of accountability, right? Like, even if you confront this person, your spouse or your child, and they're like, I'm working on it, and they probably really want to work on it, and that's true, but they literally are addicted now, so they have these impulses that are overwhelming, and they continue to fail, and and the idea of like how to hold them accountable while they're trying to overcome this just on your own is like insurmountable.
But everybody tries it.
Like you just like lose your mind. Like you just feel like you're like the police of their life, and you're gonna lock it down until like there's no way they can do this, right?
Sounds
It's
crazy,
impossible.
but everybody does it.
Yes.
Everybody does it. They try it until it doesn't work, and then they're forced to get help. So let's move on. Number 3, why it is the most dangerous and difficult drug on the planet. I kind of touched on this in the very beginning. It is. It is the most deadly and dangerous drug on the planet.
I could not agree
There's
more.
a list of 30. We won't go through all of them, but I already said one, and it's the word just. Ooh, that damn word, just porn. So you're coming to tell me that a pornography addiction is just pornography, and thankfully it's not meth or fentanyl or heroin. Unfortunately, that would be significantly easier. We have resources. Insurance will pay for it. We can talk about it. We don't feel bad to ask out and reach for help. Stop using the word just. It is. We just mentioned this. It's overlooked and ignored. It's the most underestimated, overlooked, and ignored thing until all of a sudden you can't ignore it anymore.
Well, and it's considered to be normal in a lot of people's minds. Like it's totally normal for men to look at porn or boys to look at porn, and I'm here to say I don't believe it's normal. Do I think it's normal to be exposed to porn? Yes.
Or is it normal to have that be appealing?
Yes.
Or
also yes. But is it normal to compulsively look at porn even though it brings you less and less joy over time? No, that's not normal.
Can I share a story of how dangerous this is? Because I could give you like 20 different dynamics,
Sure.
but here's one. And it's one that I wish I hadn't heard multiple times, because I've heard the same story, tiny variations, but producing the same outcome. And here it is. A young man, 20s, even a good guy, going to college, doing his things, looks like that young man that you would want your daughter to date and marry, right? Has had a porn addiction for so long. And what it has done to his brain, although you can't see it manifest like you would if they're doing meth or doing other drugs,
Sure.
alcohol, where all of a sudden they start turning green because their liver's failing them. It has ruined their brain. And here's what I mean by that, because these are good young men, some that are trying to get out on missions,
Some of the best.
some that have scholarships. Because of the porn addiction, they go and engage sexually with a woman. And after they please themselves, they see this horrific look in a girl crying who runs out of the room, whether they press charges on him or not, was just violated. And each one of these young men were in shock, because they felt like and were fully confident that they were pleasing. They were giving this female what she would want, what would make her feel good. Mm-hmm. And they were abusing her. I hope that brings some context to how dangerous there is, because we'll talk about the brain stuff and stuff right here, but that is, and anyone who sits and goes, well, that would never happen to mine, that's far-fetched. It's amazing how often that happens. And these aren't with crazy psychotic people. These are good young men that have, over time, it has rotted their brain to what pleases somebody and what it's supposed to be like. Again, that we could have a whole episode on that.
Yes.
What it does to their brain. But it's just shows to show exactly how dangerous this is.
Yeah.
And how delusional people come from this. Why do you think you see some of these shows? There was a girl we followed. She got shut down on social media, remember? She was going around videoing people at a massage parlor. Guys, all walks of life. You couldn't believe the people showing up that were coming there because it was known to give sexual pleasures, and they could, it wasn't just a massage parlor.
No, and it was like here in Lehi, Utah. And it was these sweet, poor little girls that are just being sex trafficked.
But what was crazy is in these videos, and we've talked about this in a previous podcast, these people also, when they got busted, it was almost like they just came out of this, like, a spell.
Yeah.
And like, oh my gosh, like that, again, that's how dangerous and deadly this is.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And that's the thing about this, where, I mean, yes, we're getting more and more studies, and I think people are more aware, but truly, if you understand like what the definition of addiction is, it's repeatedly doing something even though it actually no longer even makes you feel good. Drug addicts do what they do and they hate it. Meaning at the end of Danny's addiction, he wasn't feeling good. The amount of time that he actually felt good was so tiny. He was a slave. He hated it. It no longer brought that joy that it brought those first couple weeks when it just felt good. And I'm going to link this really amazing article done by a neurologist, and it's from Fight the New Drug, and you can look at it, and they do these brain scans of just a non-addicted person, like a healthy volunteer, versus a volunteer of someone who has a porn addiction. And you can look at the brain scans, and they are so incredibly different. And what's interesting is the level of compulsiveness that overtakes the brain once it's exposed to porn. Like the actual reactions in your brain is so different, and it is an exact mirror of this same brain scans done in people using cocaine. And so again, all of these compulsive porn users are self-reporting that it no longer brings them joy. Like that they cannot stop. They would like to stop, and they cannot stop, which again, that is the definition of addiction. So it like the summary of the article, again, you should look at it. It's not very long. It's not too like data-y. You won't get bored. I will link it in the show notes. And it says, bottom line, pornography harms the brain almost exactly the same as drug addiction. For those who think that porn is just harmless
There's
entertainment.
that word, just
Harmless entertainment. Science is showing us the actual truth. Porn addiction is real, and it truly is the new drug in our society.
Hey, and that, I'm so glad they threw out that word just in there.
Yeah.
Can I just please bring us back to when we share this, you may be wondering, okay, well, I already know it's dangerous. I've seen what it's done to my loved one.
Sure.
So how does that help me? Here it is. What you've been praying for, what you've been wondering, do something about it. That's why it's the most dangerous and deadly of all. We don't do anything about it. More than any other drug, we stay isolated. We wait. We hope. We pray that it will go away. As scary as it is to talk about this, if you don't, and here's the most unfair thing, this applies to any addiction, but especially this one, if you don't take action in the form of boundaries and learn how to do that with support, which we'll get into in a sec, nothing will ever change.
Well, the one thing that will change is that it will get worse. And I know you probably think it can't get worse, but it will.
That was the last point. And I don't want to harsh on it because I don't want to make you scared or worried, but all addictions are progressive. Everyone who starts an addiction with drugs or alcohol, it progresses to a point where it becomes deadly. Everyone who develops a porn addiction over time, if not treated or given the support they need, it progresses to where they're acting out, right, with people, where they're abusing, violating others, and doing heinous things where it comes to where it's inappropriate, it's age inappropriate, it's under it happens to all of them.
Yep.
So that's where it's dangerous. The dangerous thing is you sit by neutral and you're afraid to do something about it because you don't know what to do about it. And guess what? The last thing I beg and plead, like if you were to go through our courses, right, and it says drug or alcohol, do not alienate yourself from that ever again. Oh, well, they're not doing drugs. They're just looking at porn.
They are doing drugs.
That's the drug. It's the exact same. And guess what? These brain scans and studies, I hope, are going to soon, very soon, prove to the medical industry, to the health department, of how serious this is so that insurance will start recognizing. I hope we're there, but if we're not, we're going to have to start taking action. So, number 4, what it will take for them to recover.
This is a good one. You want to know?
It's going to take time with structured help and accountability. It's going to take time with other people going through the similar thing. Everyone wants to take the convenient route. They want to do it on their own. Here's the part that's really hard with porn, especially for guys. But believe it or not, so many people have pornography addiction that are women too. But they just think I'm going to do it on my own. Like,
Sure.
And again, it's what every drug addict and alcoholic thinks too. It's funny that we somehow differentiate these. They think, I'm just going to do it on my own. Like, I'm bigger than that. I'm stronger than that. I just got to not look at it. I just got to not drink. It's the same thing. What they need to do is to surrender, to surround themselves with help and support. A good example, if someone wants to recover, let's say they don't have the financial means to pay cash at some of these limited facilities that are cash only and get real. I mean, if we were to say what's the best thing for them to do, that would be it. If you have the means, you pay for treatment in a controlled environment, like a residential, inpatient, intensive place. Otherwise, you're going to repeat and go through this for years to come and to be the most permanent thing in their life. That's number 1. You go do that if you can afford it. Best way to get started. And when they're done, they're going to transition to the next phase of their recovery, which is continued ongoing efforts, even when they do come back home. For those of you who can't afford it, because, again, insurance won't pay for it, you're going to have to out of pocket. Here's a good example, and I've seen it work with a lot of guys. 90 meetings in 90 days. That's a lot. Right? Some days you have things going on. It could be a weekend or a Saturday or Sunday, and it might mean that they have to go to 2 meetings on the Monday or something. It's effort put in. What doesn't work is when they finally get to a point where it's undeniable, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'll go talk to a therapist. I'll go talk to the bishop. Bull crap hasn't ever worked for anyone. It might help them get through a day. It might help them get through a week. But it is never a solution. It is a Band-Aid. A therapist or a doctor is most beneficial down the road, steps 3 or 4 or something like that. Number 1 is sitting in a group of other people like yourself. There's a guy in our group, his name, I guess I could say his first name. His name's Paul. I love him. He uses this phrase, and he's learned it from me and dozens and dozens of people in long-term recovery while he's worked his recovery trying to help a loved one of his. He's like, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. He's like, I hear people in recovery keep telling me that all the time, and I've used that phrase. You can't sit in a room of other people with your same thing and BS your way through it.
You are so exposed.
They'll catch you and call you out quicker than a drug test will, if you were a drug addict. They need to be around other people like them. They need to hear. They need to gain strength from them. Then they're going to find someone in those groups that will become a sponsor, a mentor, someone they look up to who's going to help them. The 12 steps are amazing. This person can help them start working the steps and start healing. Every day they have some added measure of support and help. Every day they have that little teeny thing to plug into as they struggle through. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the starters. But I'm sorry to burst your bubble. If it gets to a point where you put a boundary in place, things get so bad that it's undeniable with your loved one, and you think because they're going to go talk to the bishop or the priest and confess, I'm sorry, it will not work. It will not be enough.
It won't necessarily do any harm, although I do think that it is harmful when you confess with no skill set as to actually how to overcome the actual problem.
No, you know what? What you were saying, I know it's to try to be nice to people listening.
Yeah.
But it does hurt. I experienced it.
No, that's what I mean. Is it does? I actually do think it is harmful in a way because it's not intended to be harmful. But what happens is the collapse that happens inside of you when you are like that one person, like the bishop or this therapist is like your hope of like they can help me, and then after you talk to them, when you still fail, it's really defeating. It's defeating.
It's shaming. It's. I've been there. Now, however, you go into a group of other people like you, because here's the thing with porn addictions that it does differ a tiny bit with those of drug and alcohol, is they always do relapse. Mm-hmm. Whether it's all of a sudden running across something on social media that you shouldn't be looking at or diving deep into hardcore porn, they're all going to relapse. Alcoholics and drug addicts, it kind of gets to a point where it's like they can't, even though a lot of them still do, but they will. And so they need to go back to a group of other people where they'll feel supported and they're accountable, but they don't feel shame because they're all experiencing the same thing. So I hope that point was made clear. Talking to a bishop or a priest about this is amazing. It should just be one thing of many if you want to have a chance.
Well, I like what you said. It should be step 3 and 4, not step 1.
If you're a bishop and you're in an office and a young man walks in and says, I have a problem with pornography. I've had a problem since I was 12 years old. Recently, I've started going to some groups, leaning on others who have the same challenge. I'm taking steps. I found a sponsor. And now what I'm asking is for you to help me learn what forgiveness looks like. See the difference? Instead of coming in, telling this poor man a secret that no one else knows and expecting him to babysit the process. No, get 1 or 2 steps under your belt before you do this. So I hope I didn't go off on too big of a tangent.
No, I love that.
But what is your loved one going to have to do? The reality is a hell of a lot more than they're going to want to. If it's not a residential intensive program, which is number 1. Number 2, it's going to have to be an intensive self-created program, like the 90 meetings in 90 days. The kicker is somebody's going to have to hold them accountable. And
well beyond that 90 days, too.
I wish it wasn't you. Yeah, no, that's just a start. Like, that's an intensive, good starting point. There's several other ways, but it's always more than they're going to want to do, which makes it unfair because in some degree, if you can't pay for that facility to babysit and manage the process, you're going to have to do it. Which circles back to some of the other steps of why this is so dangerous, because most people don't. And the other one that makes it uniquely difficult because that's unfair.
And you don't know how.
Which leads us right into the last point.
Yeah.
What is your role?
Point number 5.
Last and most important point, if we want to start change at all, is what your role is and isn't in this.
It's tough. And I'm just going to start off by saying, as I have so many friends and we have so many people in our program that fall into this category, these amazing women that are married to these men. I just want to tell you, if you are one of those women, that your role is not to give your husband an orgasm so he does not look at porn. That's not your job. That's not how it works either, because there's plenty of men that are willing to do both. And you actually know that already. He's either going to control himself or he's not. He's either going to be trustworthy or he's not. Your job is not to satisfy his temptation and make that your full-time job. It actually makes you get stuck in the middle of the problem. You are not supposed to manage your spouse's sexuality. You're just not. It actually entitles your husband and it obligates you. So do you see how that's like a lose-lose? But that right there is where so many of the most amazing women that I know get stuck, because they, in their mind, they're the problem. Their husband isn't getting enough sex. They're not good enough in some way. They're not doing enough whatever he wants to do in the bedroom. None of that's true. And none of that is your role in his recovery. None of it. So just know that.
And you use the word stuck. Everyone gets stuck with some sort of feeling like that.
Mm-hmm.
That they're somehow responsible or could have done something different or they didn't.
They could look different. They could be different. They could... Nope.
When's the world going to just wake up and say, bullshit? However, every great person gets manipulated and pulled into some sort of feeling like that. And what happens? So it starts by getting you stuck. Like you're stuck from taking action or doing things or seeing things different or even asking for help. And then you become sick with them. So you mentioned something in there, and this is where we're going to kind of conclude, is that they're going to have to learn to control themselves.
Yep.
And that is what is so hard about this specific drug, porn, is that's what everyone's first go-to is. Mm-hmm. Everyone listening to this episode, if it's an alcoholic that you love, aren't you applying all the same things? Like, isn't every single thing we're saying, if you replace the word porn for alcohol, the same? Yes, it is. You're probably laughing. They'll never be able to control themselves with porn. Porn, for everyone, feels like it's this thing they have to just make a choice. They just need to choose to not do it. Now, when you're in recovery and you're going down the path of recovery, there's choices made. But now when the agency's lost, remember, they started consuming drugs, porn, and alcohol until alcohol, drugs, and porn consumed them. That's not possible. So you have to edify and strengthen yourself. You gain momentum and strength from a group, from a program.
This
from a
is your
mentor.
role. What he's saying right now. That's your role.
Your role is to ensure they get that miracle. Your role is to wake up, see your part in this, and say, no, this has nothing to do with me. This is not acceptable. And instead of giving requests to them, threats to them, that you're going to leave if they don't knock it off, how many people do that? 100% for far too long. Your goal is to give them a chance. If you have to put hardcore boundaries in place, maybe that means you do end up having to leave because you expressed exactly what your needs are, and that might require them doing some things that are difficult. That's your role, but you will never get to that point alone. You will never get to the point where you can do that from a place of love, confidence, and peace if you try to do this on your own. If it remains your secret, you will stay stuck, and you will get sick with them. You probably already are.
And I want to tell you guys something. Every week I have the amazing blessing of listening to these group calls that Danny does. So he has a private support group. So these small groups of women, and they're all broken into different places,
Men
right?
too.
And men, yes, for sure. But in this particular group, it's all women who spouses are sex addicts. Those group sessions are literally the most transformative, unbelievable 60 minutes I think anyone could possibly ask for. And I can see the growth in people. It's actually incredible, the strength that they gain from the solidarity of being together, sharing these feelings, being open and honest for the first time about what it's doing to you, what the things that you're struggling with. It is beyond transformational.
Well, can I explain why? And this is what most of you are missing. A lot of you have listened to podcasts, read books, educated yourself. And when you do so, you're like, yes, you feel like all motivated. And you're like, I get it. I'm going to go do it. Maybe that's what happened listening to this show, hopefully. But everyone will lose traction, and they'll fall back into the lies of addiction, because it's cunning and it's powerful. They'll lie with multiple different techniques. And then you resort right back to old behaviors. Mm-hmm. So the reason why the groups are powerful is, like we produce these digital courses that are transformative. Some people consume them and that's all they need. But for most, in order to stay in that place of conviction, as you hold these boundaries and go through this tough tug-of-war battle that's coming up, without constant nourishment and support from others,
it's not possible.
It's not possible. And then the addiction just keeps winning and winning. So what your role is to get yourself support. Quit. If you've read everything and listened to everything that you can, the next step is you need group support. You need a structured program yourself. No better one than the Living Proof program. But you need to get yourself continued group support, not just to sit on a pity pot and talk about how sad everyone is.
Oh, no.
Because there's plenty of those type of programs.
This is action.
You do need to feel safe and heard and understood, but you need a community that reminds you every day, we are here to change the outcome, to give a person a chance to heal our family.
Well, and we are here not to speak our boundaries, but to hold them.
Hey, will you read? Do you have pulled up?
Yes, I will.
I always ask someone else to read this in the group, but we have a group mantra. So every time we meet, whether it's parents, spouses, siblings with an addicted loved one, here's what we read.
Every day, I am learning to better understand my loved one's illness and accept what my role is and isn't in their journey. I am learning how to effectively intervene and how to support them. I am learning to feel safe and happy again, no matter what they choose. If they are not ready to recover right now, I will focus on my own journey and my own recovery. Their addiction will not control me forever. I am living proof that healing is possible.
If people wonder why we're talking to the family, we're talking to you and not talking to the addicted loved one, I hope it starts to really resonate and it becomes crystal clear as to why this route is the most critical. This is how we produce change. Your loved one, once they're willing, which they're not going to get to on their own, there's a lot of resources available. We're trying to empower you to ensure that we give your loved one a chance, and if they don't ever accept it, that you never have to one day wonder, is there something else I should have or could have done? We're going to do it. But think about what we covered in this. When you feel like you're alone, you are not. There are some very extremely difficult things to this specific drug that make it very hard, that add to the fact that it's the most dangerous and deadly, combined with the fact that no one ever does anything about it until it becomes too late. There's a very long and difficult road ahead for your loved one, but it is possible. There are so many resources out there available, but how to formulate that, what that looks like, and how to get them to do it means you have to learn. You have to get support. You have to get a backbone, a rudder on your ship, or else you're just going to keep floating around lost at sea with them. We love you. We want to help. We want more people with addictions to win. I survived one of the most deadly addictions, all-consuming addiction, pornography, drugs, alcohol. And years of this torment that I tried to just overcome on my own came to a head when the people around me finally took a stand. And it wasn't an ultimatum. It wasn't tough love. It was true love. And it was loud enough I could hear it. And they couldn't have ever done it without the proper help and support that they got for them. That's the missing link. So please, in closing, I'll go ahead and read it.
Yeah, but before you do, if you are interested in learning more about our program or joining our program, please go to the links in this episode, schedule a call, learn more about the program, watch the masterclass. There are so many resources that I will link in this episode where you will have the opportunity to join if you want.
Yeah, please. And when you look at it and you're like, oh, well, they're working with people who have a drug addiction. Remember.
So are you.
So the Serenity Prayer for Families. Around the world, people in recovery meet all the time, lock arms in arm, hand in hand, put their arms around one another, and they repeat, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But there's also a prayer for family, all of those around them that love them. Do you want to read it?
I'll read it. God, grant me the serenity to accept that I cannot change other people, the courage to change the person that I can, and the wisdom to know that it is me.
Thank you guys for all of your love and support. Share our podcast with those you know who need to hear it, others in your family. We're here for you. We want to help. Stop doing this alone. Have a good week.